all, welcome on into VG Emporium, video game music and more. I'm your host, Rage Cage, and I got something a little interesting here for you today. It's something that's kind of been touched on in like past episodes, but never actually fully focused on, though this isn't going to be like a big full-on focus, because I'm doing this real quick, but I'm talking about homebrews, unlicensed games, and, of course, bootlegs. I eventually want to do an episode focusing on each one of these, but, this is a good start right here. But to note here that, just because I'm lumping them all together in this one episode, doesn't mean I'm, equating them all to each other, because, there are definitely big differences between the three of them. But there are maybe, a couple similarities between them, that being that they are not officially released, and that they are, made usually by a small independent team. So to start, let's talk about Homebrew, by first introducing you to the track that we opened up with, which was Title from Landmaster, composed by Alex Semenov, also known as Shiru, or Shiru 8-Bit. And yes, this is a Homebrew game released for the NES/Famicom back in 2011. And it was made in its entirety by Alex Semenov, so all the programming, the music, everything. And Homebrew, as far as I understand in regards to video games, is software made by enthusiasts and hobbyists for consoles that are, well past their prime. But homebrew games can also refer to, ones that are made to run on current consoles. For example, the PSP, when the Liberty City save hack was discovered, and people got in there and just started programming their own little games to run on the PSP's, hacked backend. But there's so much more to get into about homebrew, but I don't have enough time to really get into it, so I'm going to get back to Landmaster here, which again was made by Alex Semenov, who I'm fairly familiar with because I did that episode about the Sega Genesis chiptune scene, and he was a big reason as to why that happened, because he created the software called VGM Music Maker, which was a tracker that emulated the Sega Genesis sound chip, the YM2612, as well as the SN76489. And he was kind enough to share his, story up and from, when he started all the way up to that point of creating VGM Music Maker. And you can check that out on episode 25, the Sega Genesis chiptune scene of the 2010s. But yeah, he, programmed a lot of software and games for the ZX Spectrum, largely from, the mid-90s up until the, late 2000s, early 2010s. And then he started getting into NES development, starting with this game, Landmaster. And the objective of Landmaster is to adjust all these different pieces and pathways to connect the different computers that are on the screen. Which, reading on the NES Homebrew Wiki, this game was based off of NetWalk, which was a Microsoft Windows game, though it's different enough to not just be the exact same game. And, visually it looks pretty good. And then the music, of course, is amazing, because, Shiru, not just being an excellent programmer, is really good at making music. And not only that, but also really good at making music-making software, usually trackers. But yeah, just since the mid-90s, so getting on 30 years now, he's been making just different software, games, music for all kinds of systems, microcomputers like ZX Spectrum, MSX, TI-80 series, home computers like the Commodore 64, IBM PC, running either MS-DOS or Windows, consoles like the ColecoVision, Atari 2600, the Sega Genesis, Master System, and some esoteric things like Pocket PC, Power TV, and Radio 86RK. Yeah, at some point I definitely got to do an episode just solely focusing on Shiru, because there's just so much this guy has done. Because not only has he made all these really cool softwares, but he's made a lot of awesome music. But if you don't want to wait until I get around to doing that to learn more about Shiru, I'm going to be linking his main website as well as a couple sites you can find his music on. Now, one thing I forgot to, really touch on about Homebrew is that when it's being made for a console that is currently, active, like I said, in case of the PSP at that time, or the Nintendo DS or even the Wii, it's usually passed, around online by enthusiasts and hobbyists and by people that, generally are looking for that kind of thing, and it's never actually sold or, released on physical media. But in the case of Homebrew that is made for consoles and systems that are, no longer officially supported, then they are released on physical, sometimes actually sold, as, you may have noticed in recent times, there's a lot of, new games coming out for, the Sega Genesis, NES, SNES, even PlayStation, and, for the most part, they're being released as free software, though some are being, released and sold because they're being released on physical media for these consoles. You could actually get it and stick it into your old-ass console and play it on your CRT if you have one. And that's pretty damn cool. Which this kind of helps bleed into the next thing, which is unlicensed games. And most would probably say that unlicensed games and bootleg games are pretty much the same. But hey, I'm just blasting through this. I'm just kind of going with it. So we're gonna get into Opa-Opa from Fantasy Zone on the NES, released by Tengen. The original composer for this was Hiroshi Kawaguchi, and this is arranged by Masaharu Iwata. that was Opa-Opa from Fantasy Zone, released on the NES by Tengen, originally composed by Hiroshi Kawaguchi and arranged by Masaharu Iwata. And yeah, so what this is essentially just Fantasy Zone that was originally on the arcade and Sega Master System on the NES, though there are two versions that were released. The officially released version on the Famicom, which was developed and published by Sunsoft, of all companies, and then in the US we got an unlicensed release by Tengen. And I'm gonna say it here, the music on the Tengen version is a lot better compared to the Sunsoft version. So now Tengen, or maybe I should call it Tengen, I'm not quite sure which one it is, but it is a sub-company of Atari, which was created when the NES initially came out, because Nintendo only allowed 5 games per year per company. So some companies found a way around this. For example, Konami created Ultra Games, which was the game company that released the first couple of Ninja Turtle games on the NES, and then Atari created Tengen, which was their way around it. But they were not quite they were still kind of upset with NES's proprietary technology. Like, there was a chip in there that locked unofficially made cartridges out. So Atari through some shenanigans acquired the block out chip technology to then be able to create cartridges that would be able to bypass this easily without being detected, not blowing anything up in the console or anything. So if you owned an NES back in the day and you had games like Pac-Man, Afterburner, Klax, Fantasy Zone, even Tetris, the Soviet mind game, and it was a black cartridge that with the label upside down, you had an unlicensed Tengen release that had that lockout chip bypassing technology inside of it. So when I think unlicensed games, maybe I should call them unofficial games, this is what I think of. It's just like an official company that has the actual licenses to produce versions of these games, but they're released in a way that bypasses the licensing of the actual developer of the soft technology that the games are made for. And generally, they have the same quality as official releases, which a lot of the times is not the case for bootleg games, which for the most part are hacks of already existing games. Most famous example possibly is Seven Grandad, and a lot of them contain just really bizarre sprite swapping. Some of them are demakes of games, titled things like Street Fighter V on the NES. We got Mario's 7, 6, 8, 11. I mean, there's just so many damn weird bootleg games out there. I mean, I found this handheld at Goodwill that is almost nothing but bootleg NES titles on there, and there are just some weird things. But there are occasionally actually really good, or for the most part, good sounding bootleg games, which is the case for the next track, Stage 2, The Element of Water, coming from MK5 Mortal Kombat with a C, Sub-Zero, composed by Hanmin Liao. So that was Stage 2, The Element of Water, from MK5 Mortal Kombat with a C, very strange, Sub-Zero, composed by Hanmin Liao. And what you got here is a demake of Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, which was originally released on the PlayStation and N64. And not only was this demake done for the Mega Drive, but also for the SNES. And so you can imagine the sprites in this game are, based off the sprites from respective Mortal Kombat games on each console version, though a bit more worse for wear. And, from what I understand, the game is a bit janky, and about the only good thing about it is the music, which is itself are arrangements of music from another bootleg game called Xiuhu Feng Yun Zhuan, which I guess roughly translates to Water Margin, A Tale of Clouds and Wind. Which the music from that game are also used in other bootleg titles such as Pocket Monster, The King of Fighters 99, and Mulan on the Mega Drive. And the cool thing is that they're all made by different bootleg developers, so they're just all stealing from the same soundtrack. Fun times. Though I do personally prefer the version of the music in this game. Because, it has this really, full beefy sound to it. A big part of that because it uses the same sound driver that was used in High Seas Havoc, which if you haven't listened to that OST, you're in for a treat. So I'll note here that Hanmin had composed the music for Water Margin using that High Seas Havoc driver, though I'm unsure whether he actually also did the arranged version for this game or if it was done by, a programmer or somebody that worked on this game. I can find that information. So a quick rundown on Hanmin is that he was a composer that worked with various companies Taiwanese-based, like GameTech, Chuanpu Technology, Neverending Soft, Jumbo Team, and Vastframe, and a large majority of their work were for unofficially released and bootleg titles, such as Fire Dragon, Super Popo's Adventure, Pocket Monster, Huanlei Tiao Kyushu, Smart Mouse, Squirrel King, Water Margin, Barber Battle Saga, Tai Kong Zanshi, and one more for good measure, Queen Fighter 2000, which I can only imagine is a weird Game Boy Color port of Gal Fighters from the Neo Geo Pocket, possibly? Alright, so now we're going to get into our next track. This is coming from another unlicensed bootleg game. This is Earthman Stage Theme from Zook Hero Z on the Game Boy Color. And that was Earthman Stage Theme from Zook Hero Z, composer unknown. And what we got here is a Mega Man clone. And yeah, it kind of combines elements of classic Mega Man and Mega Man X, whereas you have the slide from classic Mega Man, but the wall jumping of Mega Man X. And then a lot of the sprites, especially Zook's itself, are kind of based off of the Mega Man Extreme sprites on the Game Boy Color. But, for the most part, a lot of the visuals are original, looks like, and the music is all original using the Mega Man 5 Game Boy version's sound driver. And the music is surprisingly good. And the game itself, though pretty rough, actually looks fun. Like, I haven't actually had a chance to play it myself, but it looks, fairly, pretty good clone. And then another surprise here is that it has an original story for the most part. So it starts with Zook, who is a policeman for a city. And then one day, Dr. Mitt, also mistranslated in English as Dr. Meat, unleashes an evil robot army, and one of them, nearly kills Zook, and so Dr. Meki chooses him to become a part of a project that roboticizes humans, essentially turning him into a cyborg, not an android, a cyborg. Get that through your head, Cyborg 17 and 18. But he is now Zook Hero, and he can shoot pellets, he can slide and wall jump, and he kind of has a run cycle like Mega Man X. And he's out to go stop those evil robots. You got Earthman, of course, Scorchman, Mermaid Woman, Roseman, Frozen Man, and Wagon Man. Yeehaw. And the game, works just like a Mega Man game. You select Wobot, you go through stage fighting mini Wobots, fight mid-boss Wobot, go through stage, then beat main boss Wobot, and then get to Doctor Lair, fight Doctor, win. And that's about it. So, as I said, I don't know who the composer is for this game, so let me tell you a bit about the company that actually made this game. That being Vast Fame, who is pretty well known for making some fairly good bootleg titles. These including Queen Fighter 2000, Crazy Monopoly, Harry Potter 3, Spacetime Star Beasts, Super Fighter S, and of course Zook Hero Z and Zook Hero 2. All of these for the Game Boy Color, and then they've also developed some for the Game Boy Advance, such as Rockman and Crystal, also known as Battle Network Rockman Crystal, and Super Robot Wars Ultimate Edition. And they made all these in a fairly short time, they started in 1998, though they weren't officially registered as a company until 2002, and then officially ended in 2004. And so that's what I got for you on this one. Alright, getting into our next track, this is Ice World from Sonyc, with a Y, caused by Jorrith Schaap. and that was Ice World from Sonic with a Y, composed by Jorrith Schaap. And yeah, this one's interesting because it's kind of considered a bootleg, but also not, more of a fan game based on Sonic, because like Sonic the Hedgehog, if you didn't catch that quite yet. Because, this is released on the MSX microcomputer, specifically the MSX2 Plus and Turbo R. But yeah, at the time of its release, it could, in 1995, it could be considered unlicensed bootleg because it was released on physical media, both floppy and cartridge. And they were sold for money, like, the cartridge version was 35 euros. And, it's based off of Sonic the Hedgehog, which is a property of Sega. But, seeing it was made for a computer, which, anybody can make any kind of software or game for it and release it, and, I'll be reprimanded because, it's not really getting much notice, especially since it was in the European regions, which, Sega probably wasn't even paying too much attention to for these kind of things. And yeah, it's, it is a fan game because even though it is based off Sonic, it doesn't play like Sonic, and the sprite itself is slightly based off of the Sega Master System Game Gear version of Sonic. But yeah, it's really weird. I actually got to play a little bit because I found this website where you can actually play MSX games, and you get to choose like which sound it uses and all that. But yeah, that's the thing I'll link, and you can check it out yourself. But anyway, yeah, as of 2003, it is freeware, so it can be considered homebrew, like a fan game thing. But yeah, getting into this game, I have mentioned it before in episode 16, Sonic Hedgehog Zone Act 1. Where, I talk about the creators, Elvis Gallegos and Manuel Pazos, the composer, Jorrith Schaap, and just everything kind of behind the game. So, go check that episode out, and especially because it features a few minutes of my nephew, who is somewhat of a Sonic fanatic and is just being a general weirdo. The one thing I will definitely talk about is the music made using the YM2413 composed by Jorrith Schaap, because this is definitely a really awesome use of those preset patches of that sound chip. A lot of it sounds like it isn't really that. I don't know, it's just something about the OPLL on the MSX that just, like, somehow is able to make it sound just a little extra compared to the Sega Master System. I know it's the same exact chip, but I honestly think it has something to do with the sound driver, the OPL driver, that they're able to just kind of pull a little more out of it. But yeah, the music here is definitely the one thing in this game that is not Sonic-like, because, of course, the character sprite looks a lot like Sonic. The stages, though very strange, are like Sonic stages, but yeah, the music here it's very much just its own thing, because it has like this more kind of drawn out, darker, somber tone to it. There are some tracks in this game that are a lot more energetic, but for the most part, yeah, it's just like kind of not Sonic at all. Though the same couldn't be said for the other version of the soundtrack made using the OPL4, also known as the YMF278, which is the sample-based sound chip that the MSX got later on in life, the Moon driver sound. And that definitely has its own energy. It's kind of like if Sonic was on the CDI. And I would have featured that version, but, if you know me, I have a soft spot for the YM2413. But yeah, I would definitely encourage you to check out both versions of the soundtrack because, yeah, they're, like I said, they're both the same, but also very different energy-wise. So now getting into our last track of the episode, this is coming from a port of a homebrew game. I got you here, Ending 2, True Ending, from Uwal, Quest for Money, originally composed by Augusto Ruiz and arranged by Kung Fu Furby. and that was Ending 2, True Ending from Uwal, Quest for Money, originally composed by Augusto Ruiz and arranged by Kung Fu Kirby. And so this is an SNES port by Alec Maul of the Sega Mega Drive port by Alex Semenov, also known as Shiru, who you remember from the beginning of the episode, which was a port of the ZX Spectrum original by the Mahone twins. So yeah, that's pretty cool. So yeah, this game here, I said, is a Homebrews ZX Spectrum game. So in this game, you play as Uwal, who is not very content with all the money that he has. He's got to keep making more monies. He's got to fill them coffers, because that's, I guess, the reason why he exists. So, with his many precious items from various video game heroes of his, he goes into this pyramid to collect more monies. And so what this game is a single-screen platformer, where you have to collect as many coins as you can and avoid getting hit by all the 3 different types of enemies that are in here. And once you collect all the coins, you get this true ending here. So yeah, as far as how this game plays, it's, like I said, a platformer. You move around, you jump, you gotta avoid the baddies, because if the baddies touch you, you lose all your clothes and you're totally naked. And if they touch you again, you're dead, so you gotta find a shirt before that happens. All the while collecting them dang coins. And as far as how it looks, for a ZX Spectrum game, it's pretty good. I mean, like, there's some good color separation as far as, like, kind of like the platforms go. All the characters are the same color as the background. So that would kind of make it hard to tell, like, you know, where your guy's at, where the enemies are, and the coins are. So, but they do just seem to have, like, distinct enough shapes to, like, you know, you'll get used to it. And so with the ports, you can imagine with the jump from the ZX Spectrum's limited color palette to the Mega Drives and SNES's, you know, color palette, as well as, like, the, you know, sprite details you can get from that. It's you know, details are definitely a lot clearer. You can tell what's what, and yeah, it looks pretty nice. And the music also gets a boost going from the AY chip to the, you know, YM2612 and the SPC 700 respectively. But that's not to disregard the original music, because, you know, even though the SNES and Sega Mega Drive's versions are, you know, a lot more beefier and have a lot more going on, they have a pretty strong base to start from, with that original ZX Spectrum music done by Augusto Ruiz, made using the sound driver by Wheeze. You know, it's real crunchy, it's got some real punchy percussion, but these original compositions are really strong. And, you know, having checked out some of Augusto's other music, he definitely knows how to work with the AY chip. So, going through some of what he's done, mostly for the ZX Spectrum, he's done Betiled, Biniacs 2, Phantomos Tales No. 1, Capitan Sevilla El Remake, which that was for Windows and Mac and Linux, Uwal, of course, La Abadia del Crimen Extensum, Cheryl of Bosque and Otro Bosque, and Cheman. All of these done within the span of 2007 and 2018. Now, getting into Kung Fu Furby, who did the SNES version that you're hearing right now, they are largely an SNES chiptunist, though they do other chips as well as tracker formats, and they are very active on Battle of the Bits, as well as being involved in SNES sound dev. One of the things I found saying that they are currently trying to archive all of the sound drivers that were used on the SNES and Famicom. Now, I wasn't able to track down, like, if they have done music in other games, but I would imagine that they would have. The thing is that they don't really have a centralized website, so, like, you know, all I could find is, like, SoundCloud, YouTube, Battle of the Bits, SMW Central, few other, like, SNES related sites, and those mostly just feature his original chiptune or what he's doing with SNES sound stuff. And that's all I got for you today. I'm actually kind of surprised I got as much as I did out, because I'm actually currently recording this at 12:48 a.m. Thursday, today. Yes, so yeah, you're getting this fresh, even though I am not very fresh. In fact, I am quite sweaty and sleep deprived. But anyway, I'm getting it out there. So that's why it seems, you know, things are maybe a little disjointed, and I'm not quite focusing on what the topic I chose. But anyway, you know, thank you for coming into VG Emporium, video game music and more. And I hope you enjoyed what you heard and possibly learned here today. And if you want to let me know what you think, you can reach out to vgemporium@gmail.com or join the Discord, which is linked in the show notes, where you can leave a suggestion, feedback, or even a special order, which is a song request. And, of course, you can follow VG Emporium on all the different podcatchers, such as Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and TerraPlayer, which is a hub for all kinds of video game-related podcasts, as well as the main website, vgemporium.wordpress.com. So now, hopefully next week, you know, if I have time to actually properly work on it, instead of having to, like, you know, rush something out last minute, is going to be Schaap Themes 10. But it's going to be a little different, because it's going to be a feature on a particular series of games that are based around running a shop. So if I'm able to do it proper, it's going to be a really fun episode.